welcome back to another episode of Between Sermons, where we are continuing the conversation from our sermons on Sunday. As always, you don't have to have listened to the sermon, but this really is kind of a way for us to turn the monologue that is a Sunday message from the stage, just talking at people, and really just turn it into a conversation. And so hopefully today we can dig a little bit deeper into what was talked about in Sunday's message, where we're continuing our series Between Sermons. I did that last week too. Did you hear it? Yeah. No. Anyways, I'll get this right eventually. In our series At the Movies, we looked at the movie Creed 3 and talked about toxic people. And so today, for my co-host, I wanted to bring in the least toxic person I know, and that is Pastor Harry Valentine. How you doing, man?
Doing great, man. How are you?
You know what? I'm getting there. I'm having one of those mornings where I'm like, words. I'm supposed to be talking in a microphone, and words just aren't working for me today.
Right. We'll get it together.
Yeah, but hey, so so we're jumping in talking about toxic people. Honestly, before we even get into this, we were kind of talking a little bit before that it's almost like the word toxic has become like almost oversaturated, overused, and it's a harsh word.
Yes.
And like maybe there's another word. We're probably going to still end up rocking with toxic just because it is what it is. But man, if there's another word, because I think that there's some individuals that maybe have like a toxic behavior or a moment of, hey, this isn't healthy. Mm-hmm. But to call them a toxic person is like, that's putting a pretty extreme label on them, when really it's like, no, they made a mistake, or they did something wrong, or they had a selfish moment, or, if they went into some counseling or talked with a coach, somebody would be able to sit them down and say like, hey, don't talk to people that way, or don't treat people that way. That was really selfish. And they just need to be called out on it without being labeled like you're toxic.
Yeah.
What do you think?
You know what I think, and the word that came to mind for me was maybe unhealthy moments, unhealthy behavior.
Yeah.
Because when you think of the word toxic, you think of poison. Mm-hmm. And so some of those things that come from that are the unhealthy signs of maybe a response to a relationship or a life decision or a mistake that unfortunately will bleed into relationships. It's not that it's the person, but maybe a moment in life has caused them to have unhealthy reason or decisions that bleed over into some areas of their life. Yeah.
Something that they went through, or even just the way they're behaving in a moment or with a specific individual.
Yeah.
And so sometimes throwing that, this person is toxic is really extreme.
Yeah.
The counterpoint to that is there are some people that, I hate to say it like this, but you are straight up toxic.
For sure.
Like it's like, this is not isolated, and maybe we could trace it back to its root, and there's this thing that happened in your childhood, or this thing how you were raised, or there's this chemical imbalance and it's making you. But like relationship after relationship, person after person, job after job, it's like no matter where you go, you're the toxic person.
For sure. It's the common denominator.
Yeah.
Of it all. If you're getting the results of this every single time, it seemed like it's everyone else, but I think you were the common denominator. So when it comes to the toxic label, I think it's
sometimes
appropriate to use when you can see the outcomes of certain people and certain decisions.
So I think as we have this conversation, I would love for it to be, okay, this can apply to somebody that is kind of that hyper toxic spectrum. Mm-hmm. But some of the stuff that we're talking about may be on the lesser end. And we're still going to use the word toxic just because it was part of the message and all that. And the way my brain's been working today, I don't know if I'll get another word out. And so, but really understanding that, like, hey, there's some people, like, don't cut them off because they had a bad moment.
True.
And so as we're kind of talking through all this, kind of just keeping in mind that there really is, I hate to use spectrum terminology, but there's a spectrum. Like, not everybody is on the far end of toxic, but everybody's probably on there somewhere. Like, sure. I'll be man enough to say that, look, there have been some relationships, there's been some moments where I've been the toxic individual, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit towards the end, but so just kind of keep that in mind as you're listening or as we're talking, and just kind of, maybe maybe the person in your life is on that far end.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're on the other end. Maybe you're on there somewhere too.
Yeah.
But we all need some help in this area.
For sure. I think, a good way to measure or figure out where you are on that spectrum, because I think we all fall on it somewhere.
Well, none of us is perfect, right? So,
right, so we are.
So obviously, if you're not perfect.
Right, you're on the spectrum. So I think just this awareness of the fact that you have even a possibility that you could have played your part, just the self-awareness of, hey, I played my part in this situation as it relates to how this turned out, and just owning it, owning that moment, so that you can then grow from that. Because I think that's one of the most key points to getting away from that toxic behavior is first being aware that you have contributed to the toxic behavior in some regard.
Cool. All right. Well, so we're going to jump in. So the movie on Sunday was Creed 3, which I had not watched before the message, but I watched it right after the message. Like literally, like we got home with our Chipotle and put on Creed 3.
Let's do it.
Because that's how you do Sunday afternoon in the McQuay household.
Sounds good.
And so awesome movie. I was pleasantly surprised. I kind of didn't really have expectations for it. But maybe it's just, I'm an old school Rocky fan, and I'm like, reboots for me, I'm like, so didn't really get into any of the Creeds. Watched this one because my son was like, we got to watch it. But honestly, there was some great life lessons. There was some great acting, and just all of it was, I was very happy. There were a few moments where I was like, oh, come on, man.
Right.
But we won't get into that. This isn't a movie review.
Right.
But what about you? Creed fan? You looked at me like a little bit judgmentally when I said that I wasn't really a big Creed guy.
I could say that I was the same, originally. Okay. But after sitting down and watching it, Creed 1, I'm like, okay, I see how they spent this. I love the storyline. I love how they were able to rebirth that, Rocky story through Creed. So I enjoyed that part.
Okay.
So after watching 1 and 2, I really didn't know how you could continue that storyline. So I love the spin and the twist on how they produced
come out of
Creed 3.
retirement.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh, any great boxing story, you got to have that, like, he comes back.
Yeah, for sure.
Come on.
For sure. So I'm a fan. I enjoyed it. I love the lessons that are presented in the movie, and I think we did a great job of really pulling those out on yesterday. Yeah,
kudos to Carlton, who actually delivered the message. I think some of the principles that he pulled out from it were just phenomenal, and so awesome job, Carlton. But so Carlton kind of gave us a lot of points on Sunday to really dissect, what does it look like when there's a toxic relationship? How do you navigate that? What is the right approach? What's the right thing to do? And so one of the first things that he said is that you got to identify the signs.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show too, is you and I have very different personalities.
For sure.
You have the personality that I think every pastor should have, right? Like you're very loving, you're very kind. You see the best in people.
Yeah.
You are the guy that's like, you'll take the shirt off and give it to somebody.
Absolutely.
Like shirt off your back. And I love that about you. For me, a lot of times, I'm growing into pastoral ministry, but like my personality style, I'm very systematic. It's very details, and so a lot of times I can overlook people, and it's a negative trait that I'm adjusting and I'm working through. It's one of those, God's doing things in me.
For sure.
But I think for me, it's been easier to just kind of cut off people the moment they start to show some toxic signs. I'm like, look, I ain't got time for that. I'm better off without you in my life. Like I'm totally fine if you just don't exist. Whereas I think that you kind of got that personality where you're like, no, everybody can be redeemed and everybody. And I'm like, I love that about Harry. So I gotta sit down and talk with him. Like, do you recognize signs when somebody's being toxic, or do you need somebody else to be like, hey, Harry, like, I know you see the good in him, but here's some of the not so good that you might be missing? Or are you able to just kind of see the signs?
So, growing moment, because there were a time where I was unable to see the signs.
Okay.
Because I see the good, I see the hope, I see the beauty in every situation. And when I mean every situation,
Everyone.
it's everyone.
Your basement is flooded like 18 times, and you still smiling
Beauty.
and like, man, I'm learning
Beauty.
this and I'm doing that.
But I've been, it has come a point in time where that approach at times has hurt.
Yeah.
And it's not until the hurt has already happened. In hindsight, I'll say like, man, but I saw that.
Yeah.
And I guess I ignored it. I covered it up with, hey, it'll get better. I'm sure it would, So I think the flip side of that is someone with my personality could miss the signs. And as a result of that, be subject to have to endure toxic behavior for a lot longer.
Yeah.
Had they saw the signs early on.
It does more damage.
For sure.
Because honestly, if it's a truly toxic relationship, I mean, the longer it goes on, the more damage that's done.
Yeah. And so you see the manipulation over time.
Yeah.
Taking advantage of, even in the moments, it's hard for someone like myself to even see it because I can see the beauty. I see what the individual could become or becoming. Yeah. And so if I see a moment of growth, hey, that area of growth supersedes perhaps that toxic moment or that unhealthy response or decision that was made in the moment. So it's a battle at times, but I know for sure one thing that Carlton talked about was just the being aware or the intuition that God has placed on the inside of us that we have. And I could say that with my wife and my mom, women, their intuition is just like amazing. It's like
we say all the time that like our wives are the voice of the Holy Spirit in our lives.
For sure. And so there's moments where I have to lean on those around me to show me some areas that perhaps I can't see. There's a blind side that I can't necessarily put my hand on because of the personality that I have. And I know that it's a gift from God, so it's not that I'm trying to change. I'm not trying to change it, but I must be aware because in that process, the damage that takes place over time, you notice like, man, God, is this a gift? Should I have done something different? And then you start to hold yourself in a place where you criticize a little bit more, like, man, I could have done this better. Or perhaps making this decision, if I saw it earlier, like, I think I saw it. So you begin to question kind of how God has wired you. But when you see the beauty of it, say, hey, this is what it's for. And so, it's beauty on both sides.
No, I love that. So for a lot of people though, help us identify what the signs are. Because it's one thing to just say, hey, there's signs. Well, what are they? Because like if you are maybe even from my personality side where you're cutting people off, it's like, was there even justification for that? Or from your side where it's like, I want to see the positive. It's like every situation, every person, you can interpret their actions in multiple ways. And some people will default to the explanation is a negative, and some will default to the explanation is a positive. But what are the actual signs where it's like, okay, when this person keeps saying this thing or keeps doing this, like this behavior is a sign of it's unhealthy. We could say maybe it goes all the way to toxic, maybe it's just unhealthy. But what are some of those signs that you've seen?
I could say personally, and this is every situation is different, and so you're gonna see some of those signs show up different ways, different moments. But I think for me, an area that I've seen more in a business environment of state of like competition, where it should be a partnership, but you hear words of, hey, well, I would have. I think this will be, it's more of I than we. And so those are signs in anything that should be a partnership. When you start to hear more of I within that context of communication or meetings and different things like that, that's a sign.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well,
Oh, absolutely.
If we're not moving towards the same goal as
Yep.
us, then that's an issue.
Yeah.
That's a sign that I've identified.
A connecting one to that is when somebody can't celebrate another person's wins or looks at it as, well, there's a reason why that's so, like, man, I just did something great.
Yeah.
And you're in my life and you're going, yeah, but. Well, you only got there because, or, yeah, that was good, but so-and-so did it better. Or, yeah, that's good for you, but man, back in the day, I did it like this. And it's like those little statements of like, can you just celebrate when someone else wins? Absolutely. And we even see that in the movie, right? Like, so Dame, his jealousy is probably one of the biggest toxic, signs that he has. Like, he's like, you're living my life. Yes. Like, I wanted these things. And it's like, but at the beginning of the movie, he's your little brother. Like, if my little brother starts succeeding in something, I want to celebrate that.
Yes.
But when you're unhealthy, you can't celebrate somebody else's wins. You're gonna justify like why they didn't really succeed. Like he got it handed to him.
Yes.
Or with the circumstances that he was going through. I mean, he would have had to be the biggest idiot not to succeed.
Not to. Right.
Or and you make these little comments, and sometimes they can even be said with a smile on the face. And it's like, oh yeah, good for you. It's like, good for me. Like,
And you know what happens in that is, toxic behavior will attach itself long enough to get what they want.
Ooh, yeah.
And so for me and my personality, I may not see it.
Yep.
But you're talking, hey, years later, it was like, wow, all of this time, I was just being,
They're just
take. And so now that you've received the very thing that you wanted, you really see that the relationship was not what they wanted. They wanted what you could provide and what you could give them while you had them, while they had you.
And that right there is another sign that you see is if all they ever do in the relationship is take, they never give. That's not healthy.
No.
Like that relationships, I think Carlton even talked about it. It's supposed to be a two-way street.
Yes, sir.
And when you turn it into a one-lane highway, like that's not healthy. That's not how things are supposed to be. And I get like I've got some friends in my life where I'm financially in a place that's better than where they are, and I've got friends that are in a better place financially than I am. I got across the board, and so it's like I get that there's times when like I can be a help to a friend that's in need financially, and I don't view that as them just take,
right?
Because that person will still call me up just to talk. Or send me a text just saying, hey, I was thinking about you. I'm praying for you.
Yeah. Like,
I'm not trying to manipulate. They're not trying to get any money from me. They're not trying to take anything from me. They're just like, hey, I've had friends that I realized later on that like they were using me as like their free therapist. So like it was like I realized it was like, man, it was like 5 years into a relationship, and I realized like we only talk about your problems. We only talk about your struggles. Like you've never asked me how I'm doing.
Yeah.
Or in those moments where you're like, hey, how you doing? And I start to say something, you're like, oh yeah, no, but for me, I just, and it's like, whoa, the take should be a sign.
Yeah, and I love
this ain't healthy.
It's not healthy. I look at it like this: is it adding value? Am I adding value to you, and are you adding value to me? Yeah. That's his principle in real estate. It's how can I add value to the very thing that I'm invested into? Yeah. And so I think that goes for relationships.
Yep.
The two-way street. Yep. Hey, the support should not be one-sided. The encouragement should not be one-sided. That intentionality to make sure that I'm checking in shouldn't be one-sided. And I understand that. I say this oftentimes in my wife. She's like, how could you do that? I said, well, I go into a relationship with no expectation.
Yeah.
And how can you do that? Because one, I don't want to establish an expectation for a person that they can't meet, or I can't even provide for them. Yeah. Perhaps I'm in a season where I just can't meet that expectation. Yep. So it's best that I go in where we land. That's where we land. That's our relationship. I have some friends where it's strictly basketball. I have some friends where it's strictly business. I have some friends strictly ministry. And just because they don't cross doesn't mean we don't have a relationship. Right. I think the boundary is set based off of the expectation we both provide. And I think it adds value to both and.
And that value doesn't necessarily mean it's one-to-one.
Sure.
So it's not like, well, I bought lunch this week, so he has to buy lunch next week, and if he doesn't, then he's toxic. No, like that's not what we're saying. Like,
right.
It's not a one-to-one match, but it is like what is the value that they're bringing to the relationship, and if they're not, like, just understand that. And like and I've had some relationships where like I recognize like, oh, this isn't really a friendship. This may be defined as like a mentorship, where like I know that I'm on the giving end of this in a major way. But if I'm aware of that, then I can put the boundaries, and we'll talk about that in a second. Like, I can put the boundaries in place that I need that are going to be different than somebody that let's say is an actual friend. And it's not, I'm not just your coach, I'm your friend.
Yeah.
And in that friend moment, there may be some coaching. Right. There may be some times where I'm like, hey, let me help you with that.
For sure.
But we have a genuine relationship, and it's not built on just that one thing. When a relationship is just built on that one thing, like you talked about, you've got friends that it's just this or it's just that. Like that's okay. That can be healthy. You just understanding what that is.
For sure.
And sometimes if you're trying to have a two-way street relationship with somebody and they're just a taker, it's like, okay, we got to redefine this relationship, and in that redefinition we got to put in some different boundaries. So let's go into that. What do healthy boundaries in these relationships look like when you identify somebody that, okay, let's label them toxic or let's just label them unhealthy? What are some boundaries that you can put in place to keep those relationships healthy?
Wow. So I think a few boundaries that are beneficial that could help. And I guess this is all dependent on the personality of a person. But before I get into that, I want to just say that oftentimes we don't set boundaries to after the hurt.
Yeah.
And it's not that it's too late. At least you're starting somewhere.
And then I don't even know that you call that a boundary. That's more like a wall. Like you just put up a wall between you and that one person in that one situation.
Right.
Yeah.
But
guardrails don't do any good after you've crashed your car.
Absolutely.
Like,
so true. So I think for me personally, and I think something that helps is, a boundary of communication. Just really first off identifying and communicating. Yeah. Okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm at. This is what it is, and this is what it's not.
Yep.
I think that's a very healthy boundary that you can establish up front, out the gate.
Yeah.
This way, both sides know where we are and how we're going to move in this relationship. Another is, just, I guess, depending on what that relationship presents, whatever capacity that it's in, you have to set personal boundaries for yourself. I know some areas that I won't allow to, lines that I won't allow to be crossed. And so the moment someone is inching towards that line, you have to be the one to turn them away and push that. Push them back before they get too close.
And knowing how to do that is the difference between you becoming the toxic person or not. Like, you can have a healthy boundary and somebody starts creeping up on it, and your response to them being too close to the boundary could have them walking away going, man, that guy's toxic. And it's like, no, this is a healthy boundary. I gotta let you know up front, like, this is the boundary, and this is why it's in place. And sometimes that can feel offensive, but I think it's healthy.
It is. It's healthy for both sides, because the moment you cross that, you may see something that you haven't seen before. And we don't know what's on the other side of that boundary. We don't know what hurt, what pain, that can show up and then hurt the individual a lot more. So I think it's healthy to have, but I think the first starts with just establishing those and communicating what those boundaries are in the relationship.
So, like, one of the boundaries that I have is who knows what. Like, there's some information about my life or struggles that I'm going through or situations the family's going through that I will share with anybody. I'll sit on a podcast and talk about it openly because I'm not really a secretive person to begin with. But there are some boundaries that I need to put in place where it's like, okay, look, I'm not going to address that issue with this person because they're toxic. They're not in a healthy place. And if I give them this, it becomes ammunition that they can use against me or against others.
Yeah.
And so I have to guard the boundary that I have to put is who gets what information.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some people that get full access.
For sure.
And there's some people that just get kind of the surface level.
Yeah.
And then there's all kinds of in between. And it really is just like, okay, if there's a medical thing going on in my family, who knows about that? If there's a spiritual thing going on in my life, who knows about that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not healthy for nobody to know.
Right.
But it's probably not it's just as unhealthy for everybody to know everything.
So true.
And so for me, that's one of the boundaries that I set up. Kind of with that, kind of a simple boundary that I have is some people get my email address.
Mm-hmm.
Other people get my cell phone.
Yeah.
Some people get the church number.
Yeah.
Right. And and that's boundaries. And honestly, for me, like a lot of people have my cell phone. And I tell them like, use it.
Yeah.
But there's some people where I'm like, yeah, I should not have given you my cell phone number. That was a bad idea.
Yeah. I think a boundary for me personally, because of how I'm wired, is that I have to filter, certain situations through my wife.
Yeah.
Not because of anything other than perhaps I just can't see it.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, there's been times where I just can't see it. It could be right in front of me, clear as day, and I'm like, no, but. And so practicing that over time in a healthy way has helped me to identify, like, well, man, yeah, I saw that. So if someone is maybe a personality similar to myself, just have someone a safe place that you could bring certain things to and say, hey, am I not seeing this correctly? Is there a change, or maybe I should put my attention to this very area a little bit more, because that's helpful. Yeah. I don't want to lose the gift that God has placed on me, but I want to not also be the one who takes all the beating and the bruises in the process of it all. So I think one boundary is to have someone else, support system.
I was just about to say that we define that on Sunday as you need a support system.
Yeah.
And so you've already kind of gone into like part of your support system obviously is your wife.
Yeah.
Who else is in that support system? Like you don't have to name names or anything, but like what kind of people do you put in your support system or individuals where it's like this is how I build a healthy support system?
Yeah, you know what? You attract, those individuals just by being in community, being intentional about community. Some people know, not some people, just about all people know that I'm in community with, kind of just know, oh, that's Harry. This is how he operates. So I think in that respect of that, they find a way to establish a healthy relationship within the way that I am, and to my point of adding value, that I could add that value also to them. Yeah. But I think just being intentional of the people that you have, and with the expectation of each relationship, allowing for it to mature and develop at the pace that it should, and if those individuals that you find yourself in relationship with, you then start to compartmentalize them as needed. Hey, if this is a text, email, personal, hey, we're going to go out once in every blue moon or not. I think that would definitely help, and you'll start to see that you have variety within your community, and I think that's important. Like the cliques or just this is my group, this is my type of people only. I think there's some danger in that because there's no new friends, no one else enters into this space, and because of that, you don't have the variety that's needed, that blended variety to help you in areas that you may need to mature or you may need a rude awakening in. Someone who is a little more open and outspoken to kind of talk directly to the situation. If you close that person out because that's totally against your personality, how you feel, I think you miss the opportunity for growth. Yeah. And so I think for me it's just allowing for the variety of relationship to happen throughout every aspect of my life. And then as I'm going through those, you start to identify who's where, when, what, and how. And that has been a great asset for me. And I feel like I'm just like a universal remote that, hey, I could turn on just about any channel and be in any room at any time simply because of that model. I'm looking for variety, but there is still an expectation and of each of those relationships that we must present and establish.
Yeah, and maybe sometime we'll have time to kind of do a teaching on this, but like there's different types of people that everybody needs in their life. Like everybody needs a pastor, everybody needs a coach, everybody needs a mentor, everybody needs a friend, everybody needs a counselor. Like there are these specific individuals that everybody needs, but that would take us a whole nother podcast to kind of break down and walk through. But I'm curious for somebody that's listening right now and is like, okay, the toxic person is my spouse and I'm isolated. And so Harry's like, man, the people around you, that's your support system, and your spouse is your support system. And like, well, my spouse is not, and I have nobody around me. Where do I go? Like, what's my starting point for getting a support system around me that can help me navigate through these relationships?
Start with this safe place. Because not every place that you're in could be considered safe. Yeah. Identify that part. When I'm being a coach to a friend or mentor to a friend, one of the first things as they're presenting the issue or the problem, can you see yourself in it first? I know what they did. I know what contributed to your feelings right now, and I'm not being insensitive to that. Yeah. I first want you to see yourself. What you could have done differently in the moment. Because I think we have to understand that we contribute. There's two-way. You know, I mean, I know I shouldn't have responded that way. So if you can see yourself, I think working from that place will then help you to put in proper steps to maybe come to a resolution, maybe even some reconciliation with that individual, because everyone wants to protect self-preservation, right? I want to protect how I feel, and so we get into this, but you, the finger pointing, right? And I think starting from me first, working my way towards us, will then help the other person realize, like, hey, they owned some of what they did, and perhaps it was years ago that now you're looking at the person in front of you, what they become because of something done previous that you just have forgotten. So I think when it comes to that spousal relationship, that part of it is identify self. How did I contribute to perhaps what I see before me today? And if I could look back and say, this person wasn't like this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe I contributed to some of this. Own that, then you could walk into the steps of maybe reconciling. But I think starting with a safe place, bringing somebody in with non-bias to the situation, and just let them just ring you out. You know, it's not personal. You know, I want to see you grow, but I think you need to uproot some of those things, some of those behaviors, and you first have to deal with self before you could deal with us. Right. Them.
No, I think that's super healthy. I've heard people talk about like your spouse is whatever you make them.
Yeah, for sure.
And I can see that, like when I am doing the right things towards my spouse, man, the relationship grows in a healthy way, and what I start receiving from her, like it's like, man, this is great. When I start putting in garbage in, garbage out.
That's right.
And so I think that's fantastic advice. I'll just add so for somebody that's like, I need a support system and I don't have it. Like don't underplay the value of professional help. Like get a counselor, get a therapist, get somebody that is trained to help. Because like that could be a safe place. That could be the outside help, and your support structure could be built around this counseling relationship. Now, it may take you some time to find a counselor that you connect with, that you feel that trust with. I'd absolutely recommend, above all else, a Christian counselor, because you want to make sure that the advice that you're getting and everything is biblically rooted, and it's going to point you to God and not away from God. And so, because there's just all kinds of craziness out there. But man, just don't underestimate the value of if you feel like you don't have a support system, man, a lot of insurance companies now will cover counseling. If not, man, there's some low cost options. There's some people out there that can help. We've got a counseling team here at CLC that helps. It's it's for our members, and it's short term. So like you're not going to get your 10 years with this
Sure,
person. It's
sure.
short term. It's, a few weeks, just really it's assessment, and it's kind of helping you get through some stuff. But man, seek professional help.
Yep.
If you really need, if you have no support system, maybe start there.
Yeah.
And then I would always recommend the spiritual side.
Sure.
So find a pastor,
Yeah.
find a ministry leader. A big part of my current support system came through life group.
Yeah.
You start doing relationship with people,
Yeah.
and you realize that, man, when something's going wrong, the first person or the first group I want to text to pray for me is that life group.
Yep.
And so get into community, whatever that looks like. If you're at CLC or if at a different church, whatever community looks like there.
Yeah.
Man, get into community. The other thing for me is support system has come about. I work at a church, so it's kind of cheating.
Yeah.
But serving in ministry is a way that I've been able to build support systems. So it's people that I've been working with, and some don't even attend CLC anymore, aren't on staff at CLC, don't participate in anything at CLC anymore, moved away or whatever, but they were added to my support system because we were doing life together, because we're working together, or because we're volunteering together.
Yeah.
And now, like years later, like there's still going to be a quick phone call.
Absolutely.
Because I need some support, I need some help.
Yeah.
And then I've also got some people just completely outside of the church organization, some pastors around the country that I've met at conferences or met at random places, and it's like I need some spiritual insight from somebody that I don't sign their paychecks.
For sure.
Right? Which is kind of fun. I don't sign anybody's paychecks. So I don't touch the money. But hypothetically or
Right.
whatever, like just this idea of even pastors need
For
a
sure.
spiritual support system outside of their church. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah, those are some of the key people that I would look to. Like my first support is my wife. But
Yeah.
for somebody that's listening right now and they're like, my husband is the toxic person, or my wife is the toxic person, that I can't go to them. Okay, do you have a counselor?
Yep.
Do you have a life group? Do you have a pastor that you can talk to?
Yeah.
Who around you can offer that wise support? I think one of the problems, though, is a lot of people will go from one toxic person to another toxic person, and it's, they're trying to get help with this toxic person by going to this toxic friend from work.
Yeah.
And it's just like, just no, don't do that.
That's not healthy
at all. That's not a good support system. That's not what you
go
need.
from unhealthy to unhealthy. And I think there was a moment in Creed that the wife really started to chew him out.
Oh yeah.
And she really wanted to know.
Yeah. What's going on?
Yeah, what's going on? Like, that was the sign, the heart, the passion, the love of support. And I don't think we want that support to come by way of that. That's not how we want it to look at times.
Yeah.
But to get to the root of anything, that's the only way that I want it. That's the only way that I want to receive it, because it's going to go deep. It's going to be able to pull up those hurts, those pains that another unhealthy person may not. Because an unhealthy person would just, yes, yeah, you're right, for sure, pat you on the back. No, you're doing the right thing. You're good. And all they're doing is digging a deeper hole.
Yep.
Digging a deeper hole. So you need the passion, you need the love, and it's going to show up in a really uncomfortable moment or time. But we saw the bounce back because of that moment.
Yeah.
To pull the truth out.
I love it. It's beautiful. All right, we're gonna kind of wind down. Got a last couple of questions for you that I think would be beneficial. The message's kind of closing instruction was, there's one thing that we all have to do, and that's love people.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Because that is biblical. That is,
For sure.
Jesus said, they're going to know that you're my disciples by the way you love.
Yes.
Like, love has to be this paramount thing, over and over in Scripture. Love God, love people. Love God, love people. Love God, love people.
Yeah.
You want to sum up the Bible in 2 commands, just love God, love people.
That's right.
So we have to love. How do you love a toxic person? How do you love somebody that you've identified, you recognize, and we're not talking about on the left-hand side of that spectrum.
Sure.
We're talking full-blown, this person has the skull and crossbones sticker on their forehead.
Right.
Their oil drum is oozing something green. Like, if Daredevil touched it, he'd get superpowers.
Right.
So Daredevil references in the middle of this. I don't know what's going on. But how do you love a toxic person?
Oh, from a distance.
Ooh, that's good.
I mean, there's no other way.
Yeah.
I think they will be able to appreciate you more from afar, because when they had that close proximity, they couldn't value the relationship. They couldn't value what you actually brought to the relationship. And so from a distance, you'll begin to see, man, the benefits and the added value that individual actually was bringing to you. But because you were so close in whatever agenda, however you felt, the competition, the underlying tones that presented themselves, whatever that was, you couldn't see. It was almost like you were always in competition. You know, you was always trying to get the one up. And now that you're not able to do that because of the distance, I think you value the relationship, the friendship more, because I'm not competing. Now I can see, wow, I could actually benefit from that. I actually need that. You could see that the times you were maybe called out wasn't to hurt you, it was actually to help you. It was actually to raise you. It was actually to pour into you, encourage you, to bring you up to the place that they saw in you. And I think distance is the way to do it. I mean, the only way to do it. And we see that at the end of Creed. And we were talking about that pre-show, but I think that moment when
they do their
you know, and he's like, yeah, you know, your family's waiting on you. For me, my soul, I'm like, he's family too. Let's go. We're gonna walk out here together. We want everybody to see. But Creed,
let's go to dinner together. All
let's
of
do.
us.
We're done. We're here. Let's go. But Creed knew he had already set the boundary, and this was him enforcing it. As much as in him he knew that Dane was family. I have to enforce the boundary.
We need some space.
Distance. Say, if you need anything, you know where to find me. That was that support, but it's gonna be from distance. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that in that distance, you can still be praying for that person. You know, there still can be love and care that's expressed.
For sure.
But, you know, you don't need to bring them over to your house around your kids.
Absolutely.
I think that's brilliant. And that whole distance piece, man, I wasn't sure where to bring this up. I wanted to. I had to, because my wife found this meme and gave it to Carlton, and Carlton didn't use it. So, Carlton, you're on Soul's list right now because you didn't use this, and it was brilliant. But it's this idea of don't allow loneliness to cause you to go back to a toxic relationship. And I think the full quote, it connects basically this idea that you don't drink poison just because you're thirsty. So don't go back to a toxic individual just because you're lonely. And sadly, as a pastor, as a person, as a friend, I have seen countless people end up with a toxic person that they knew was toxic before they ever got there. Like they knew, because they had broken it off. They had separated. Sadly, this 90% of the time, this is a dating thing or a marriage thing. This is I would rather be with Mr. Wrong than be with nobody. And so, man, what hope or help can you offer to somebody that's like, I know this relationship is toxic, but it's the only one I've got. Or if I break off this friendship, then I have no friends. I have nobody to hang out with. Or if I end this dating relationship, I've got no prospects. You know, I'm at my age or at this circumstance in life. It took me 10 years, to find this thing. There's another meme that talks about, don't hold on to a mistake just because it took a long time to make it. But it's like, how do you not drink poison when you're thirsty?
Remind yourself of the healing. So if you could remember the day you broke it off and how you felt the day after. You felt this relief. You
weight
felt,
off your shoulders.
Man, I feel lighter now. Remind yourself of that day and remind yourself of the days after that where you saw yourself in a different routine, a different space mentally, emotionally. Continue to remind yourself of those daily wins outside of that toxic relationship. I think that will help you say, hey, I'm loving the results. Love the results that is happening. So the moment you find yourself thirsty for whatever reason, maybe a movie come on, a show, a song plays on the radio that reminds you of that moment, remind yourself of the daily wins that you've had outside of that toxic relationship, because that song would only last for 2 minutes.
Yep.
But you have a lot more life to live.
Yep.
And so I think the daily reminders of the wins will definitely help you.
And then go back to that support system.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you need the support. You need a healthy enough support system to say that dude is trouble.
Yeah.
Do not, or man, that girl is a mess.
Yes.
I know you hate being alone right now.
Yeah.
But being alone, trust me, is better than being with that person, because you were awful. You felt awful. You acted awful. You life was horrible when you were with them.
Yeah.
Don't go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's this justification of, but they've changed, or but they've grown, and maybe that's true. That's true like 2% of the time.
2, yeah, for sure.
98% of the time, you just got thirsty.
Yep, that's right.
You got lonely, and so you're trying to avoid the signs.
Yeah.
The signs are there, but you got to read them.
Yeah.
Right.
It's hard to see through a broken lens. Yeah. So as you're healing, you have to heal in order to see.
100%. Yep.
So until that happens, you might have seen some of those fractures kind of smooth out a bit, and you feel like, man, I'm doing better. Yeah, you're doing better, but you still have broken lenses. So you have to make sure that you're completely healed in order to see it correctly, see it the right way.
Yep.
And so I think that's important. Accountability would definitely show you, like, no, girl.
Yeah.
Nah, bro. It's not good. Don't do it. You're
Nope.
doing so well. And I think you get both ends. You get the accountability, but then you get the encouragement. Keep going. You're doing amazing. I'm here for you. That support system definitely will put you back on track.
Yeah, for sure. Love it.
Yeah.
All right, so we started off, we talked about this idea that there's almost like the spectrum of the toxicity, and the reality that because none of us are perfect, we are all on that spectrum. We're all on that. I can honestly say there were some dating relationships that I had before I got married where, like, I look back on some of my behavior, and, like, in the moment, I don't think it was intentional. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be whatever, but I'm looking back and I'm like, man, Brent, you were toxic.
Yeah.
Like, you were using that person.
Yeah.
And, man, that was not good.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what do you do when you identify, I'm the toxic one?
Yeah.
Like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Let me fix that. What do you do?
I think that's really hard. I don't
well,
know.
to identify it,
Yeah,
you probably need somebody to say, you're the toxic person.
You're the toxic one. Yeah, and I think that's the hard part of it all. But I think it goes back to the common denominator. If you're trying to say, man, why am I not growing or elevating? It doesn't seem like I have, the friends. Everybody is saying this. And those are the signs and the words that you could really process through your mind and say, maybe it's me. Yeah. And if I've heard it more than one time,
is that a Taylor Swift song? The Hello, it's me. The problem is me, or whatever.
The problem is me. The problem is me. Whoever. But I
my
do
daughter
think,
was listening to it or something.
But I think you can identify that I am the problem.
Yeah.
That is hard, right? But the moment you do, I think that starts this process of healing.
Yeah.
But then also the process of reconciliation.
Yeah. To
restore some of the relationships that perhaps you contributed to. Yep. To restore even the personal healing, because I think the individual, we look back in that story, we see that Dame, I don't think, although he had some hard moments in life that contributed to some of his behavior, it wasn't until that moment of life, that moment where things began to just shift for him. Yeah. And he had to adapt to this new way of living, which then changed his mindset, his personality, his character, and he had one goal, bitterness setting in, all of these different things. So I think it's important that we go back, just take a few steps back and say, I know I'm not like this. What contributed to this?
Yeah. How did I end up here?
Handle that piece.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of good people, a lot of great people. One decision caused them to change and feel and act the way that they do now today. Yeah. But it wasn't them before. And I believe that God can restore that. He could heal that. He could change that situation for you. But you have to first deal with that head on. Yeah. And say, hey, what are the roots? How deep are they? Yeah. I'm dealing with this area and I've dealt with this, but I've just learned how to deal with it my way. identify that, and I think that will help the individual, the toxic individual, then become maybe get closer to that middle part of the spectrum.
Get a little more healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that self-awareness is really hard for a lot of people.
It is.
And even for people that are like, man, I'm self-aware. Like, there's blind spots. There's stuff that you miss. I think the healthiest thing that we can do is when we recognize that, everybody's on this toxic spectrum somewhere. Stop and say, okay, where am I? And even just evaluating every relationship, okay, with this person, start with the big key relationships, with my spouse, with my kids, with my parents, with family members, okay, with these key people. Have I demonstrated toxic behavior? Have I been taking more than I've been giving? Have I been able to celebrate their wins? Have I been able to encourage them and celebrate with them without making it all about me?
Yeah.
Have I been, the main character in everybody's story, right? Like, are there things that I need to own up to? And I think that as you evaluate those relationships and say, okay, with my kids, I'm not a toxic father, but man, I lost my temper. With my spouse, I'm not a toxic person, but man, I realized that I wasn't really trying to meet their needs. This season right now, I've just been trying to get them to meet my needs.
Yeah.
Okay, they've been struggling. I've been doing nothing about it. And we self-reflect. We look at each of those individual relationships and say, okay, how have I been? If I had to give myself a score of 1 to 10, 10 being Jesus, 1 being Dame, how toxic have I been? And identify those things, and then man up. Sorry, female listeners. I hope that doesn't offend you, but woman up. I don't know. I don't know what the phrasing is. That's politically correct right now, but own your mistakes.
For sure.
Go and apologize. Repent. Identify this was not right. I am sorry that I did this, and here's how I'm going to rectify it.
Yeah.
Here's how I'm not going to continue doing that thing in the future. That's how you handle being the toxic person.
And that's what keep you from being toxic. Absolutely.
Yep. To get to that point where you need the sticker on your forehead and the oozing can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, that process is the way that you could then move closer to the healthier side of the relationships.
Yeah.
I think what keeps you on the other side is the fact that you're not willing to take those steps.
Yep.
You're not willing to self-identify, to be self-aware. It's me. I'm not the problem.
Everybody else is the problem, never me. That's the problem.
Yeah. Good stuff, bro.
Awesome. All right, this is a great conversation. Love hanging out with you. You're heading off to New York shortly.
Yes.
Going to be awesome.
It's gonna be
have a great time with the youth. Can't wait to hear all about it when you get back. But
for sure.
Yeah, this is Between Sermons. We'll see you next time. It'll be our last at the movies message. So get to hang out with my wife for a little bit. You don't want to miss it. Check it out.